And we are live with the last virtually connecting session from OER 18. My name is Christian, I'm the virtual buddy today, and we have some virtual folks. Helen and then Greg, would you like to introduce yourselves, and then we'll move on site.
Awesome. I'm Helen DeWard. I'm an instructor, faculty of education here in Central Ontario.
I am Greg McVeary. I am a faculty member at Southern Connecticut State University in New Haven, Connecticut.
All right, thank you. On-site folks.
Hi, I'm Maren Deepwell. I'm ALT CEO and I'm the organizer of the conference.
I'm Martin Weller from the Open University.
I'm Lorna Campbell from the University of Edinburgh.
I'm Momo Sala from Demonfort University.
All right, thank you. So this is the last session for OER 18. We've all admired your shoes, Lorna, even virtually.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we've got silver ones on today. Mama do like the red ones. He wants I'm going to do a deal with him later.
I think he was not the only one judging by the tree.
What else has been going on site? What are your impressions now that OER 18 is almost over?
Well, it's been a beautifully sunny conference, which makes everybody happy when they're not in sessions. And obviously the keynotes and all the other sessions have been really inspiring from what I hear as well. But I think it's been actually a really interesting conference politically speaking. We've had a lot of sessions about like OER for refugees, for lifelong learning, for medical education. It's been a very critical discourse where I think people have been really joining in, asking some difficult questions to which we don't really have any answers yet as a community. So I think that's my biggest takeaway from the last 2 days.
Mm-hmm. I would certainly agree with that. And one of the things that really struck me about the OER conference over the years is how it's become much more international. It started off as a very UK-focused conference, but I think it's really expanded in its scope, and it has brought with it that very critical discourse. And speaking to people who are here at the conference, who have travelled from all over the world, they've said that's one of the things they really value about it, is that it is quite a critical conference. So yeah, that's certainly something that I would take away from it.
Yeah, and I think for me, this is my first OER conference, but the palpable positive energy vibrating throughout the conference has been really, really kind of like exciting to witness. And the conversations, the provocations, the disagreements and the agreements, and the discovery of new territories, and just site meetings with such a diverse group of people. It's just been really, really good. And, you know, definitely, you know, I am very honored to have been part of it.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite conferences. I think it's about the right size, and it always feels, I think part of the venue, we're in a kind of cinema place here by the waterside. It feels very informal and relaxed, I think. And today I deliberately didn't choose any sessions to go to. I went on a random approach. I was going to go into, I didn't know what talks I'd go into. And that's always a good sign, I think, and they're all interesting, you know, whereas a lot of conferences you go into some and you think, oh my God, why am I sitting in this talk? So I just decided to choose at random, and they're all interesting and varied, so it's brilliant.
Of course, the flip side of that is there's always at least 2 things you want to be at the same time, frequently 3, and trying to choose out of all of them is really, really difficult. I've missed loads and loads of sessions that I would love to have been at, because I've either been chairing a session or there was something else I promised to participate in. So yeah, but it's been great. And I think having such a lively channel on Twitter with everyone sort of commenting on the papers they're hearing has been really important. So you can sit in one session and be following another one on Twitter, which is great. There was one, was it Nick Baker?
Yeah, Nick's session had
that sounded amazing. I wasn't at that one, but it sounded incredible, absolutely incredible.
I think in some ways online participants have the best seats because you can follow it all kind of, I think when you're here it becomes quite overwhelming. So.
At times it really does become overwhelming. Viv mentioned that OER is now beyond just the context of the conference, but it becomes a year-long process of engagement. It becomes a kind of a starting point for a lot of people. How do you see this evolving over the next 12 months till OER 19?
Good question.
Well, maybe I can start, but feel free to jump in, anyone. But I think for us here in the UK, our Open Education Special Interest Group plays a huge role because they lead activities from across the community all year long. So we have highlights like Open Education Week or the OER conference or other events, but they really gathered a lot of momentum. And that's where we also do a lot of work with policymakers, which I think is an important part of the role we play. But I think one of the real purposes of this conference is for us to build new relationships. And I think Mamadou and I were talking as well about all the things that this conference inspires us to do. Last year, we closed the conference, didn't we, with a sort of vow to change things. And we said, you know, I will do this. And actually, a lot of people are reporting back progress and what they're doing. So I think it's really showcasing people taking personal action and putting their beliefs into practice.
And I think, again, that's maybe one of the things that's been quite noticeable at the conference this year, as well as all the kind of debate and discussion and critical discourse. There's been a lot of really, really inspiring examples of people actually doing stuff. And I think Mamadou's keynote last night was, the sort of like the apotheosis of that, all these amazing projects. But so many people doing like really, really amazing work. So, you make these connections and hopefully follow them through.
Yeah, and I think the Twitter activity was just like, whoa, what's happening here? It was like an explosion. It was really, I was actually quite shocked, in a pleasant way, quite shocked by the level of conversations happening. And I think also, I mean, there's been also a lot of, there's been significant cross-fertilization, and people talk about, can we work on this? Can we work on that? Can we take it out there? Let's find a way of, getting that. Somebody was talking about digital civics and how that can be applied. And I was like, whoa, okay, it's another way of looking at it. So I think the conversations are gonna continue offline and possibly back online as well. So I'm really, really excited, and I'm hoping that, we'll have a lot of projects to collaborate on.
I think in her keynote yesterday, Lorna sort of set out the kind of OER history in the UK, and I think the good thing that's happened is it's kind of moved beyond just being about particular projects and kind of, it's almost like a mindset within the sort of UK higher education community. So I think it kind of gets embedded through the year-long process because of that, I think.
And I think it's also important to remember as well that openness is part of alt strategy, and it's really important. It's actually embedded right in alt strategy, so it's there all throughout the year.
And I would say, I think that's what I took away from, this wasn't about the tools, the technology. From when I was watching the Twitter feed, we really got into what is the culture of open. How does that culture of open reflect Western values, or not maybe necessarily be inclusive to indigenous cultural practices where our values of open might not necessarily congeal with, other cultures. That was something I never even truly thought about. Here in the States, we have a Go Open movement, but it's not as, I think, robust there. And as we're thinking about this mindsets that you were just talking about, what I'm taking away with, what happens when we have students who've grown up using OER from kindergarten to they get into higher ed? What happens to their mindset, their global mindsets? What happens, that's, longitudinally, I'm very interested in thinking, if we build systems where kids are working openly and using open tools, what does the world look like after they've done that for 20 years? So that's kind of what I'm thinking on from the conference.
Well, I think for a start, what the world would look like is just normal. Diversity will be just normal to. I mean, I've got a daughter who's 12 now, and there is, things that she just accepts as being absolutely, completely normal, no discussion. Like, the non-binary gender, for example, just the way it is. It's normal to her. And I think, I think that's why diversity and inclusivity is so important, that, for kids who are growing up with this, it just becomes normal. And I think that's what's really important and really powerful.
I agree with that. But I also think this conference, one of the things that I really find valuable is that actually we are mature as a community to actually acknowledge that we have a long way to go in many areas, you know, and whether it's like from an institutional point of view, how funding is allocated, or how policymakers, you know, like I still think there is like this tendency, you know, on a large scale to look at the cost benefit first. You know, how can you save money with open textbooks? And, you know, I don't think anyone here would say, oh, it's not a good idea to give people open textbooks. You know, obviously it's a great initiative, a super great example. But there is so much where, you know, that inclusivity and diversity where it's not yet built in. And I think what I've really found nice about our conference this year was that, carrying on from last year, that actually there were people brave enough to say that there is some more to do. You know, it's not all just shiny examples of success. And I think that criticality is really key for us to acknowledge that we do need to be thinking about diversity and inclusion from the very, you know, foundations, and put our values into practice rather than kind of adding it at the end. So I think that's for me like a really big deal, that we actually are confident enough to say we're not yet there, you know, in all respects. At least that's for me and my perspective.
I think David Wiley ended on a similar point that you make, Greg, about, you know, in 2023, we maybe start having the first faculty who've come through education with OER. So having killed off, we tried to kill off the idea of digital natives in EdTech. Perhaps we can now start up OER natives to grow up with OER. It's a thing. Let's make it a thing.
No. Let's not make it a thing.
Keynotes await.
I can hear Dave White somewhere scribbling something down about OER.
An OER visitor.
I think one of the themes that I've noticed coming through in quite a few of the sessions as well is about how we communicate around openness, and how it's important to be you know, critically aware of the language that we use and how we communicate openness, and that's come up in actually quite a few sessions. So I wonder maybe if that's, you know, a sort of a sign that we are becoming more reflective on our own practice and more aware of the impact of how we speak and how that, you know, impacts on other people and other communities.
Yeah, and who speaks and who gets to listen.
Indeed.
And who's, I think what Maren, what you said in terms of reflection of values resonated with me, and the criticality aspect, because as I think many of the what I was able to catch from live streams and the Twitter stream was that there is a huge discourse going on in Bristol about who's missing, who's not at the table, but also who should we include and how do we do that, and is that best done with a pragmatist approach versus an idealistic one? So what kind of resonated with me over the last 2 days was that OER 18 seemed to be a place where those conversations happened.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's been really nice this year is to see more students at the conference. I mean, Alt has always, it's great that Alt provides supported places for people to attend the conference, but it's been great. I mean, I keep bumping into people who are sort of like, you know, postgraduate students or, you know, working on their thesis, and you know, I think we really need to bring these people to the table, and we need to listen to what they've got to say as well. So that's and again, Alters to be applauded, I think, for, you know, making that possible.
Well, if any of you are able to join for the plenary live stream this afternoon, one of our first-time delegates, Priti from Mauritius, is a PhD student who is coming for the first time to this conference, and she's going to be one of the individuals sharing a sort of lightning moment from OER with the audience. And I think it's been a great, like, we are really trying, I think, to give people an opportunity to have this conference as a platform to add their voice and to make it, you know, resonate. And I've been trying to follow online, and so many people have blogged and shared stuff, and they're not here. So I've actually been finding it quite a rich experience to see the online participation echo in, you know, where we are here. So thank you to you all for contributing your thoughts as well online.
Well, hopefully we'll get some lightning slides from virtual participants as well for her talk. I saw that it's a crowdsourced plenary, and she's asking for people to submit slides. So if anybody's out there in the there's virtually connecting to the OER Keen conference, somebody should make up a slide for the closing plenary.
That would be great. That'd be really good.
Definitely, you're so welcome. You've got another 45 minutes to get out. So, Greg, not to put the finer point on it, but you know,
I said somebody, not Greg.
Yeah, that's a classic case of you have a good idea and suddenly you're the one that's going to do it. That would be awesome. Really good.
Yeah, that's true.
I think there were lots of questions about what's next for Open, right? I mean, Greg just pointed us, and David Wiley did that, I think, in his keynote as well, as you pointed out, Martin. What do you think what's next with Open, with OER, however you would want to frame it? Because I remember this conference seems to take up threads from last year before. So which threads do you think will continue?
I don't know if that was, everyone started looking at me, so I'm going to answer. From a personal point of view, we've just finished a project funded by Hewlett looking at open textbooks in the UK. So, and that's been interesting. There's been a lot of interest about that. And when you go to faculty, they go, "Oh, I hadn't heard of it. What a great idea!" But I think what it does show is that it's a long haul to kind of get that awareness raised, and you know, so finding funding in order to be able to use, I think you need another couple of years of just going around to universities, doing those workshops, raising the profile, you know, getting librarians aware to kind of get it in there, and then you start seeing that change. Then once people start adopting them, they start doing different things with them. So, so I think just understanding it's that kind of long haul. The other thing I've been interested in at this conference is, you talked about the future, but also we've started to look at our own past more and sort of, you know, bringing some of the history. So Lorna's talk, Tanis and Viv did a talk yesterday, and David's talk today kind of drew upon the history of OER, but not just in a, isn't history interesting? It is, you know, it's worth looking at in itself, but I think also about how that informs our way going forward as well, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I actually think that's a great point, because I think often the sort of history perspective is really valuable, particularly for new people. And there are a lot of new people here who've never been to an OER conference, particularly younger practitioners, teachers who are just discovering it. And I think one of the like Lorna's keynote yesterday and Mamadou's as well really inspired a few of our delegates who just never come across, you know, those resources, those readings. And I think it's so important that we don't keep reinventing, you know, solutions to the same problems over and over, but that we also move beyond advocacy and kind of say, actually, there is a body of impact and research, and we know what makes a difference and what works in many contexts. So I think particularly for those people who are just discovering openness and OER, that perspective can be really powerful, I think.
Yeah. I think, I mean, in terms of where next, I think, in terms of like the wider open movement, I do think this issue of inclusivity and diversity is going to become more pressing. I think it's something that we're aware of, but it's how do we act on that, and how do we negotiate what open means to very, very different communities. And there has been some interesting discussion about openness in Indigenous communities and about who has the privilege and the right to open access to knowledge. So I think all these discussions and debates are really important. From my perspective, working in the University of Edinburgh, we've made quite a big commitment to open education and open knowledge, and have invested quite heavily in that for the last 3 or 4 years now. And we're just basically working to embed that in the university to make sure that that's really embedded, and that as many of our staff and our students are engaged in open knowledge initiatives as possible, whether that's creating or using open educational resources or editing Wikipedia. We're doing a lot of work around Wikidata at the moment, but really we want to try and make that sustainable right across the university. So that's kind of on a much more kind of like, that's my day job.
Internationally, when we're talking about, you know,
It's okay.
when we decide, because I agree with you, when it's like at the university level, we can figure this out. But when we're talking about the cultural norms around sharing, when should we push back against norms, like if we don't agree with them? Like I'm thinking back to some of the research we did with like web access in India and Kenya, where women just fundamentally in their cultures are not allowed to be online. when do we push back? Should we push back on, or do we just say, well, that's, local norms say that, that's just the gender norms are set up this way in that culture, and it's not our right to push back against that. But should we be pushing back when we try to introduce these in cultures where women or other minorities or just any kind of underrepresented group in an indigenous culture doesn't have the same kind of political capital as other members of that same community? Should we just not say anything? Do we push back? What do people think?
I think, Richard, that's a very interesting one, and I think we can easily choose a position between the extremes of relativism and dogmatism, and kind of like take any of those positions. But I think there needs to be a middle ground of cultural competence and global literacy in situating, in contextualizing our actions and reactions to these particular things. But yes, I think it's that globalization, and to a large extent, the internet is inevitable on an inevitable march, and to try to stop it is just like trying to block the sun with one finger. It's going to happen anyway. So I think there needs to be a lot of sensitivity in terms of challenging norms, but also part of what we do is about the disruption that all the speakers really spoke about. We cannot be reproducers of oppression and multiplying the hierarchy that already exists. But it's about understanding the context in which we challenge these things. But also we need to be mindful whether we're peddling a very Eurocentric, Western-centric agenda in what we're doing, and because it all starts from the construction of social reality, and as far I would say, what is the logic of our system, and then how is knowledge configured, how is it sanctified, how is it disseminated, how is it validated, and who is doing those validations, and is it a two-way street or is it a one-way street? So I think there are so many multiple complexities that actually would depend on context. But I think you're raising a very, very important point. And this, as Lorna said in her speech, and also earlier, that this needs to be negotiated. And I think the fact that we're starting to have this dialogue is actually quite interesting, and I hope that it will continue. And I am not sure. And Richard also, David mentioned this earlier, that there isn't a one fixed solution. That it depends on situatedness, positionality, and all of these other things as well.
Yeah.
I was very struck in your talk yesterday, you saying it kind of seemed very much, it was a dialogue between the students you take out there and the people who live there. It wasn't, I think sometimes those projects have a kind of saviour complex, and you kind of really got around that, I think, and so there's a benefit both ways. I think that's a really good example for us all to kind of learn from.
Very much so.
All right, thank you. I'm not sure about your time on site, but I'm pretty sure you have to be somewhere in a couple of minutes, don't you?
Thank you so much for sharing, everybody. For all of us who couldn't make it.
I think that these Be Connecting sessions are also one of the highlights of the conference for me. I've taken part in a few at both OER conferences and alt conferences, and it's just great to be able to speak to people who aren't here in the room, and it's quite often this is where the really thought-provoking questions come from. It's great.
I think this is the only time I ever get to meet Helen other than Twitter. We're just Be Connecting friends, I think. This is our space here. Whenever I see you, we'll Be Connecting. But no, and I wanted to say thank you as well to all the Be Connecting buddies online and on site, because I think we really value that opportunity to have an informal conference dimension. Obviously, there's a lot we already try and do online, but I think it really enriches the experience, and it's fantastic for us to hear your voices here as well and be able to listen to, how our conference sort of ripples across where you are. So I know Maha isn't with us, but I know many of you are here involved. So I just wanted to say thanks as well for Be Connecting with us.
We'll convey that to the I think this is the moment. Sorry, Helen, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for me, it just extends the opportunity because I can go back and watch the keynote presentations based on the conversations you've presented for me.
I hope I haven't contradicted myself.
We'll find out soon. This is the time to stop the broadcast, I think. Thank you all on site again.
Thank you very much.
Bye.